Are you feeling like dating can be extremely exhausting, disappointing? Maybe you've had an experience with a guy or girl where you built up all these expectations in your head and then you come to realize that they're not exactly what you thought they were going to be or who you thought they were going to be. So if this is where you're at right now, currently in this moment, and maybe you want some comfort or some answers with what you're feeling in the dating world nowadays, it can not the easiest, can be, but I think we don't make it easy for ourselves. But maybe this episode is for you. So today I actually have an expert with me who is going to talk through my recent experience with dating and date a guy that I've been dating, I guess. Caroline, welcome to King of Hearts. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming all the way from Amsterdam. Caroline is a psychologist and coach, life coach.
Yeah.
Yes. And funnily enough, just off topic, but when I arrived this morning to come and record, we met at reception downstairs and I just came in a wave of, I guess, like emotion and had a little cry with you about my recent experience with a guy. But we're going to go into that today. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming.
If you love me, let me fly away. Maybe I'll come back to you. Maybe I won't.
How did you get into this whole field of psychology and life coaching?
I am a psychologist for a very long time already.
Yeah.
I have obviously my own share of traumas and
Don't we all?
exactly. I did my own work, explored for many years by now. Yeah, different paths. What can be done that's beyond just what I knew as a psychologist.
Right.
And yeah, that's how I became also like a social media person, let's say.
Yeah.
Trauma is so much more than just the war or the car accident that we all maybe know and would identify with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma is something so much deeper. It's sometimes the invisible wounds
Right.
no one sees. I don't want to, make it compare which one is worse. They both hold the physical trauma as much, pain
As
the
emotional.
emotional trauma. But
Yeah.
I think we need to speak up and share this more. And I wanted to create a platform really for that, to normalize also, vulnerability, to, identify self-awareness, create that, oh my God, that's me. That's not about judgment. It's about that there's a possibility of healing, to provide that opportunity and that guide that we all kind of seem to be needing.
Well, I think the world needs a lot of healing. I think as a collective, I was speaking about this with my life coach, but we've gotten to such a divide in the world where there are more people going downhill and being driven by the ego and by insecurity. But then there's also the other polarity of a lot more people becoming enlightened and seeking for healing and seeking to work on themselves and self-development, which is where I'm sure a lot of your followers come in, and a lot of girls that follow me as well. Like I try and really practice vulnerability online. And I recently, which we're going to go into, had an experience which I wanted to share with the podcast, because I do think that not only could you help with advice, but there are so many young women and men that go through dating, and especially I can only speak for myself, but you come in with so much expectation from someone else, and you meet someone, for example, for the first time, you go for like 2 or 3 dates, or maybe you're dating for 2 months, and you build up this idea of what could be with that person, and you build up this narrative in your head which doesn't actually exist, because you don't really know that person very well. You can't really know anyone that well going on 2-3 dates or spending 2 or 3 days with them. But I was fortunate enough to have an experience where I got to spend an intense amount of time with a guy that I was romantically involved with very recently, like the last few days. And it all kind of came crashing down, and I feel really disappointed and disheartened. And what advice could you give to someone who, I guess, to soothe that wound of disappointment when dating goes wrong?
Dating is a really tricky thing because it's a very new concept. How I experience it, that we would think, wait, our childhood plays a huge role in the dating. And it's basically the first relationships with our caregivers, parents in that sense, shapes relationships in general. So it becomes a little bit a red line. So of course, when we go on dates in the teenage years, 20s, later on, 40s, it doesn't matter. Can date in any stage. These things do play a huge role.
Yeah.
How we grow up, basically. So that creates a filter of how we see things, but also how we experience connection. And that's the tricky part, for example, if we have emotional neglect or emotional abuse through a narcissistic parent or an avoidant parent, or also betrayal, like that can be a divorce, or we feel sort of left alone in some ways.
By our parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is an invisible wound created. A lot of times we sit with this alone as children, and it internalizes, and it's me.
I'm the problem.
Yes, I'm the problem. That's a child's mind. That's also a bit of a teenage mind, because the brain is different. It goes through different stages of development, and trauma can hit us in any time in our life, and it's again just so invisible. But that shapes how we then connect with others later on. We create almost these filters, like glasses of how do I see it? How do I experience it? It's your brain, your nervous system play a huge role. So sometimes people who grew up in very chaotic, stressful environments, parents divorcing, fighting, arguing, that's chaos. That means you're familiar to stress.
Right.
That's your normal. That's your what you know. That's the only thing that you've navigated, and maybe navigated really well. But the problem lies here. Your brain and your nervous system register stress, chaos as familiar.
And comfortable.
Yeah, it's safety. It's even though you can consciously tell me, no, it's super, not good, and you would give the best advice to your friend. If you go into a dating situation and meeting someone who causes you stress, and I'm going into an extreme now. Let's say you date someone who would be narcissistic, just to give it a label, and who would make you work for love, that causes you deep down stress. Okay. You also become that, you fill in the role that you maybe knew. Becoming the fixer, the people pleaser, the person to have to chase love, to work for love.
I've had that.
And that's the problem with it. You identify this as, when you go home after date 1 or 2, is, wow.
The chemistry.
That swooshed me away, that guy. Exactly. It's that high, the dopamine, but the childhood wound plays out. The hope, I can fix this. It's not coming out this way as a conscious thought, thinking, based on my childhood, I want to now fix this.
Chaos,
no. But the nervous system registered this as like, oh my God, yes, this I know, and the brain as well, and they love, and that's a problem.
Familiarity.
They love familiarity, and that's where unhealthy relationships actually happen, and it's hard to break free from it unless both, let's say, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing also, would recognize their own wounds and would individually, in an ideal scenario together, but have done already some work of awareness, healing
on
and
themselves,
so on and so forth, because we want to fill that wound of like, I'm not good enough, and now if he loves me, if this person finally accepts me and sees me,
then I'm good enough.
Loves me, then I'm healed. But you give away all the power to the person, and then it plays out. Obsessive way of thinking, waiting for the next text message of like, when is he gonna text?
Yeah,
is he
that's
gonna text?
me.
You have that short-term relief of yes.
That dopamine, yeah.
Yeah, but it's also a form of power, because you were helpless and powerless in your trauma, in your childhood. A child is, in a sense, always dependent on a parent. It's a natural, thing of evolution. We are dependent until we can walk, we can feed ourselves, our caretakers. But this is the thing, you are powerless and helpless, particularly if they're traumatic situations you cannot escape. You have to navigate. But we want to regain some form of power. It's also linked a lot of times to control.
Yeah.
And
'Cause I'm also a control freak.
that can happen. That
Yeah.
it goes in line with perfectionism a lot of times, But
Mhm.
deep down core wound is I am feeling unworthy.
Oh, for sure. And I think a lot of us, especially if you're listening to this and this resonates, where you date to, I guess, seek for external validation, because part of you, and this is something that I've struggled with, is like, part of me really wants to meet the one and really wants to meet that person that's going to complete me. And I'm learning this year that only I can complete myself. And I mean, going back to this experience that I had over the weekend, I went away on holiday with a guy and we'd been speaking for a month. Again, this is never good. Never ever have an online relationship with someone because they're completely different online than they are in real life. People can portray themselves in a completely different way online. Yeah. And then it kind of, within the first 8 hours, I knew that something was off. He said something that I did not agree with, and not agree with, but I just don't align with, because I'm not like that. And this is, if you're a girl listening to this right now, I hope that you also take a lesson from this. He was like, "You're not my usual type." And I was like, "Oh, what's your usual type then?" Like blondes. And I was like, "Oh, that makes me feel," inside I was thinking that makes me feel shit about myself. It makes me feel really unworthy. And now I feel like I have to prove myself to him that I am worthy. He's almost had a little dig at me of being like, "You're not what I usually like, but I'm giving you a chance." Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
but the dynamic is already the power dynamic. I'm putting myself above you,
Right. I didn't know that.
and you have you're lucky. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Never want to label anyone from the outside, but sometimes it helps just to simplify things. So if someone is quote unquote narcissistic, I make you feel that you are lucky to be with me. Obviously, I can woo you in different ways. Maybe that happened already online, but saying that is like, again, it makes you work. And not that narcissist would know, what kind of attachment style.
And maybe it's not even
conscious.
conscious.
No, it's not conscious. It's not. It's just the dynamic of the power of control.
Right.
Want to hold over your emotions. It's just an almost textbook way of saying it. I find it so fascinating that they're literally lines that are just textbook almost
Textbook narcissist.
because what you experienced was your wound was triggered.
Oh, big
Good
time.
enough. And
Made me not feel good enough at all. I was like, then why has he invited me on this holiday if he likes blondes, And then he'd be like, "Yeah, but I like you. So there's a reason why you're here."
Oh.
And I was like, right. So I'm supposed to feel grateful to you for taking me on holiday,
and
even
that's
though I'm not your
moment.
type.
And again,
Yeah.
overrule, and that probably maybe not happened. We overrule in this moment our own inner boundaries because we're used to it. Because you're used to maybe that pain,
Maybe.
to working
For
proving
love.
your
Yeah.
worth. And that's also sometimes the hypothetical that plays a role because you had been online for a month and your mind had created maybe a
This idea.
potential way of us being together.
Big time. I had already envisioned the holiday without even going on the holiday. And I'm sure if you're listening to this and you're dating someone online and then you meet them in real life, you have this idea of what you want them to be. And then when you see that they're not that, you still try to convince yourself that maybe they will become that.
But
Maybe
that's the biggest red flag for you,
for me.
It's never about you cannot fix the other person, but it's your inner red flags of like, oh my God, if I travel into the future and I'm creating a picture with that person in it, it doesn't allow you to notice and identify any red flags because your
In the
mind
moment.
will reject almost everything,
Mhm.
of overrule it and be like, no, but I'm going for that future picture that I've created, and it's driven by hope.
And it's also, you're only seeing what you want to see.
Yeah.
So this thing that happened, I kind of just brushed it to the side, mainly because there's I guess, a deeper part of myself that's insecure and wants to feel like she is worthy. And him taking me on holiday was like okay, maybe I am worthy, because even though I'm not his type, maybe I am worthy to be here. But having said that, like, I am the fucking shit. Like, I'm a cool person. I'm amazing. And like,
Wonderful.
and I should feel wanted, not like, oh, you're kind of like, there's no one else, so here you are, you know?
We're just going to take a pause there and we'll be back after this break.
I mean, after he said that, I was immediately feeling bad about myself. And to touch on that even more, we then watched a movie. He was like, I really want to show you this film. I love it. It's really fun and a nice film. Have you seen it? Girl Next Door. It's about a really hot blonde chick
Oh, dear.
who's actually a porn star.
Okay.
And he was like, she's cute, isn't she? When we were watching. And I was like, is this actually happening? Like, I've not only felt bad enough to understand that I'm not blonde, but now I'm being shown a hot blonde who's a porn star. That makes me feel great about myself. Great. It's so great. It feels amazing. I feel really worthy of being here.
I'm sorry, that's like for me difficult to hear.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of girls, women, also men, can you also be the other way around?
Yeah.
Go through something.
Oh, for
like
sure.
this and stay in it.
I stayed to the remainder of the trip because I was a people pleaser. And if he's listening to this right now, it's, even if he does hear this or his friends sent him this and are like, oh my God, she spoke about you on the podcast. It's not about him. It's about the lessons that I've learned from that experience. And he's not a bad guy. He's not evil. He was honestly like really sweet at moments and like nice. And like, and he's not an evil person, but there were some things that he said just did not align with me and made me feel bad about myself. And I feel like through this experience, I feel the need to help other girls to notice the red flags and for you to come on here and be like, this is not correct.
Yeah, but I have to jump in a little bit because it's about you. And yes, we don't want to, punish the guy or anything, but
Yeah.
he made you feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And there's no justification on why he made you feel that way. It was not good for you. Yes, you stayed, but now you identified that was not what I wanted. And the thing with boundary creation that can happen later. Sometimes we feel like, oh, missed my window of creating a boundary, and guilt kicks in.
Yeah.
Or shame after.
I had
Sometimes we
so much
shame
guilt and shame.
ourselves, That's the other thing. That's the aftermath of it, of the emotional wound that's been created, in that moment. You need to sit with it and you go and analyze it yourself. You analyze, and that's the tricky part. And that's a bit of not the downside of being an empath, but you justify and analyze him too, why he did what he did to you. And sometimes we're like, yeah, but he maybe came from also,
A place of insecurity.
insecurity and trauma, and maybe he has childhood trauma. Yes, that can be true, but
That's not my
his
problem.
part in his share to work on. That doesn't allow and should not allow you to hurt.
Exactly.
You. So
Yeah. And I deserve, and this is why I'm like, cut it off so quickly afterwards and just said like, listen, our values just don't align. Like, I just, not in a attacking way, but it's just like, we're just different people. And what you want a blonde and I'm not blonde, and you want cheese and I want milk. We're just two different people, not in an attacking way. But it's also made me realize that I deserve to be in a relationship with someone that doesn't make me feel like I have to work or doesn't make me feel unworthy.
true. Did you tell him that it did hurt you?
No.
Because that's sometimes, and don't get me wrong, then sometimes that's the thing with when we're so used to dealing with the pain by ourselves. We don't communicate with the others and we don't let them know, and that's the thing with empathy, and also people.
You don't want to hurt their
I
feelings.
don't want to hurt their feelings, but I am hurt. But that's a problem for you because you sit with the pain.
Yeah.
But you don't give me, in that case, him,
And maybe he could
an
learn from that.
opportunity. It's at least something. It's something for you, but also for the other person. You give them an opportunity, a platform to respond. If you tell me, Caroline, what you just said hurt me, I have the opportunity to, if I care, as a human being, as a friend, as some random stranger, if I did hurt you, and I have a level of compassion and empathy, I can
Yeah.
say, I'm sorry, Chiara, I didn't mean
No one's
to.
perfect, you
No,
know.
exactly. But then there's a communication point
True.
that you feel secure, that you feel safe with me, even if I did
Mm.
hurt your feelings and I said something that was maybe out of line or for you an experience that triggered you wound. And that's where emotional intimacy can take place. And
Right.
safety and that feeling of a real romantic relationship or friendship or any form of relationship.
Yeah.
When I take accountability, but I also want to learn from you and understand what was maybe a trigger or how
Yeah.
you feel.
Yeah.
So we come together and be vulnerable together.
I mean, the moral of the story is it didn't align. Like, it didn't feel good being there. Like, it was fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, we had a fun time, but I had this idea in my head that it was going to be this like connection, and we just had completely different values. And it's like, how can you advise someone who's going through dating and I guess kissing a few frogs? Like, how do you keep your heart open to then meet someone new? Because at this point, like after that holiday, I'm like, I'm so done with men. Like, he's not an evil person. That, again, I want to reiterate that. But there were just things that just did not align with who I am as a person and my values and my morals. And I was like, oh God, like that, I completely put him on a pedestal. And like, I was completely disappointed by the outcomes of that. And I now am really like disheartened by meeting someone new again and starting the whole process all over again. And I think if you're listening to this right now and you're also like disheartened by dating and constantly getting disappointed, how can we keep our hearts open and staying positive during this?
There's no one way of answering this, but
Yeah,
I
it's a
immediately
big question.
I'm sharing this because it immediately pops in my mind. I was thinking, was there ever another person that you put on a pedestal, a male figure?
Yeah,
Who would that be?
my dad.
Exactly. And that's a little bit what we're doing, and there's no wrong in being, very attached to your father.
I'm so attached to my dad.
But if there are things that happened in your past, there can be, for example, a father who is emotionally unavailable or, starts a new family. There's sometimes a divorce. So all of these things for children can be felt as an experience of betrayal.
Oh yeah, I've definitely felt betrayal with my dad.
And that's an emotional wound, an emotional trauma created, a belief of he left, abandonment.
Yeah.
That's a huge one to navigate. But the thing is, and we can still go on dates, but if we identify what you've identified, like, okay, I'm a people pleaser, you mentioned, I'm very kind and caring. There's two sides of the coin, eh? But a people pleaser, and I think it's more like a sort of fawning response of like, I'm making sure I'm liked by everyone because I don't like to be judged or, conflict avoidant.
I think most people don't like to be judged.
No,
and
we all
most
don't.
girls, speaking to all of my girlfriends, they also want to be liked. They want to feel loved. Everyone wants to feel liked and not judged.
Definitely. But if it comes for the price of your needs not being met, or your boundaries being crossed, then it's a high price to pay. It's a short term, nice and high and wonderful, but a few years into the relationship, and maybe a few people can relate, they sit with the thoughts that you mentioned also beforehand. You did thought of like, oh my God, my needs were not met. Just naming them, communicating those, really expressing them is almost a foreign concept to people who've navigated the emotional wounds by themselves for so long. So it's about doing the work within yourself.
Yeah. But how can you do that work but also still date? I don't want to be like locked away in a cave and doing all the work on my own, because also relationships and dating have this beautiful, I guess it's a mirror effect.
Exactly.
They show you everything that you need to work on. And I'm grateful that I had this experience with him.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful because it made me realize these are my boundaries. Like, I didn't want to have sex with him and I stuck to my boundaries and I was really firm with them. And I'm so proud of myself that I stuck with that. because, you know, you go on this romantic holiday and of course things happen. Like I'm a 26-year-old woman. I'm not 16, but I knew that like I really stuck to that. That was a lesson that I learned. And then the other things, everything that came up in that trip was like triggers for me. And how am I going to deal with what he's saying and how he's acting? And I'm grateful for that. It was an amazing lesson. But like, how many more lessons do I need to learn? And how many lessons as women and men do we need to learn in order to then get that perfect, not perfect, because again, perfect doesn't exist, but the right relationship that fulfills you and does meet your needs.
I get that question actually quite a lot, because I think there's no right and wrong, but I think my personal take is it would be wrong to say, oh, you have to first do the healing work
on your own.
You're ready to date. That's never going to work, because healing is not with an end destination and then you're ready.
It's a constant.
It's a constant thing. But it's about, okay, I'm giving myself the beauty of time. The time, there's no rushing in it. For example, if you notice, my mind goes into the hypothetical inclination of things. That's where you can go back into like, no, I'm teaching and training myself, and it's the beauty of, changing also the filter that we've, or the wounds that have created for us. We can heal those. That means through nervous system work, through neuroplasticity. We can help ourselves with the somatic work, breath work.
Yeah.
So many other things.
Breath work is crazy good.
Journaling, a wonderful skill of
I love journaling.
Putting things on paper, but changing things up, and even small things help with neuroplasticity, but to an awareness of around attachment wounds, and all of those things can help you identify like, hey, I need to give myself the concept of time, and I really need to check in with myself consciously. It's a bit of also the conscious work. How am I feeling after every single date?
I wasn't feeling good after.
And your nervous system, your body, they're very good indicators.
I'm super sensitive. My body is, and I think that's another thing. I think the last thing we can touch on before we end this episode is listen to your body. And we don't listen to our bodies. Like after I left that first day, we did like a sauna ice bath thing, and then went back to his, and he was quite pushy sexually. And I felt a little bit like used. And I did bring that up to him the next day, and I called him up and I was like, by the way, I really didn't appreciate that. You were like very pushy. And I should have listened to myself the first time. But again, it was that hope in me that was like, maybe that was just a one-off, and maybe he does respect my body, and maybe he does like me, not just for my body.
And that's where it becomes tricky. Your mind presented you again based on that hope and narrative, and jumped into the future, and that feeling, that desire to get that presentation,
which isn't real,
is the tricky part. But it's like, no, I'm gonna go into consciously looking what happened in the moment. How did I feel on the date when he said that? Is that for me okay, or is it not okay? Can I live with something like this? Because people show always their true colors. Is sometimes us, and
then we don't want to see it.
We don't want to see it. We avoid the
red flags. Are you sure it's not green? Are you sure? Are you sure that red flag's not a green flag? No, you're so right. And I think, what I've taken from this is trying to stay as present in the moment. And if you are dating and finding it tricky and building this big idea of that person in your head, and it doesn't work out because you have these high expectations of this person, which also isn't fair on them, to stay present and listen to your body.
Yeah, the body tells you a lot. And the work is very much like attuning, somatic work, doing things to regain the trust within yourself from your nervous system.
Yeah.
Because once you have that, and that's lost along the way of emotional like trauma, that work is something that you can do, but you can still date along the way, but keep on checking in. Give yourself the luxury of time and take it slow. I think that's the most important part in dating, really taking it slow. That's difficult in a fast-paced world like this.
It is.
The next swiping next, it's going too slow or wrong, but you deserve that luxury. Which is
going
not,
slow.
Quote unquote. It is okay to take your time.
Yeah. Well, that is a great way to end the episode, because you're right. We should be taking it slow and getting to know people slowly instead of jumping straight into bed with them or straight into a relationship with them, because you don't know who you're getting into a relationship with,
True. Yes.
and people will surprise you. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on and giving me some insight into what I should be doing with my current love life. And to everyone listening at home, if you enjoyed this episode and it helped you gain a little bit of perspective on dating and how to navigate it, the highs and the lows of it, it is fun. True. Also, definitely give this episode a like and a follow the pod as well. And also follow Caroline. What's your full handle?
Caroline Middlesdorf. It's a tricky one.
Middelsdorf. How do you spell Middelsdorf?
Middelsdorf. Caroline Middlesdorf.
Caroline Middlesdorf on Instagram and TikTok.
Yes, on TikTok and
Yes.
YouTube.
And YouTube. If you need any more insights or you don't know where to go to for psychology tips, or maybe you're kind of feeling a little bit lost in your healing journey, we all need a little bit of love and TLC and healing. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for coming on again.
Thank you, Kara. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Amazing. And I'll see you guys next week.
Maybe I'll come
Bye.
back to you. Maybe I won't.